Hey guys, welcome to the 7th episode of the Warrior Philosopher podcast. I'm joined as always by my good friend Brandon Williamson. We are back in our, I don't even know what our hometown counts as anymore.
Yeah.
When you become an adult, it's like your hometown can be shifting every few years.
We're back in our place of residence.
Yeah, our place of residence, our place of work. We get the blessing of doing the best job in the world. Today's episode is on The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's an episode that we've been wanting to make for quite some time now, so we're really excited about it. I think given that we've covered a lot of Eastern philosophy so far, Miyamoto Musashi, Bruce Lee, we'll be going in, I believe at some point, into Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, getting into Taoism. So the art of war being influenced by Taoism and then influencing future Eastern philosophers such as Musashi and Bruce Lee. I think that this is a very important and episode that I feel that will really be able to get into some very interesting concepts that you'll probably be able to relate to a lot of the past episodes, I think.
No, yeah, without a doubt. So, a note on Sun Tzu's Art of War. It's very influential today still. It's not just, a lot of people look at it, especially in memes that I see, and they look at it as like rather simple, because Sun Tzu does say some things like, don't attack if you're going to lose the battle, but people who all they can take from it is just that, really need to focus on a lot more, on the bigger picture of the book. But examples for how this book is still used today, many corporations, specifically
Like Wall Street.
Wall Street corporations, and a lot of seminars that work to teach business leaders to become CFOs or CEOs. Their curriculums involve this book, or corporations have this book as a required reading list for those who are higher up in the corporate ladder, as well as the military applications that are still used today. For example, as we will delve into very deeply today, China's backing for their military philosophy is on the Art of War. And even from the American side, I believe General Schwarzkopf planned Desert Storm around the Art of War. So please, I would encourage you all to read this for yourself, because
Short book.
It's a pretty short book, yeah. And as always, we can't go into everything in the book today, but
as much as we can. And just to note, a lot of these Eastern philosophy books, I'm currently reading the Tao Te Ching, Tao Ji Kundu, Book of Five Rings. All of them are very short, and very simple, straight to the point, which I think is interesting about Eastern philosophy. You have whole trains of thought based on pretty short books, so I think that's really interesting. In comparison, though, you have Western philosophy, which you have like one philosopher has like 500-page books. You have like your Kants of the world, your Nietzsche's, and so on and so forth. Now, you talked about the Art of War being very simple in its wording, and a lot of times the applications are misunderstood. I think that a lot of the great philosophers of our time have had very simple concepts, that people will be like, oh, well, duh. But then when you delve deeper into these simple things, you often can get a lot more out of them. And I think that's what we'll get into today. Now, I made an intro video on the Art of War that some of you have probably already seen, but nevertheless, I just want to do a quick brief introduction. I have it pulled up right here, straight from the script of that video, but I'll just briefly summarize it. So, the Art of War was written in the 5th century BC. I guess that 500s would be 5th century. It was in the 500s.
the 6th century.
6th century BC, by Sun Tzu. Now, obviously, Sun Tzu, like many Eastern philosophers, are shrouded in mystery to the historicity about his life, but we can generally pinpoint him to have lived from 544 to 496 BC. He was born in the state of Qi or Wu, and he served the king of Wu, He Lu. He was a chief strategist in his military. One of the battles that he is noted to have been a part of was the Battle of Boju. Again, this is historically unclear whether or not he actually participated in the battle, but the story goes that he defeated an army 10 times their size in the Battle of Boju. Since then, the Art of War has been credited by many different generals throughout history, especially Eastern generals. For example, Shi Huangdi, who unified the Chinese the nation of China. It was the first real unified Chinese state was in their Shi Huangdi.
Where his name comes from.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
What?
The first emperor.
Gotcha. I never put that together.
Yeah.
No, yeah. That's interesting. Now, funny enough, when you see these great, these kind of big dictatorial guys, a lot of them like burning books. He burnt a lot of books, but one of the books he didn't burn was The Art of War.
Yeah.
And he was a big proponent, an advocate for the strategies within The Art of War.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know much about Shi Huangdi, he helped unify the Chinese language. I believe he began the construction of the Great Wall, or was it already partially built?
It was already partially.
So he was like adding to the Great Wall. Gotcha. Notably worked a lot of people to death, so much so that their bodies are buried within the foundations. Yeah, of the Great Wall. Mao Zedong, especially, and that's another thing we'll see in continuation throughout as we go through the book, is that a lot of sort of rebel leaders have utilized this. People without with resources that less resources than their enemies, such as Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong started off without as many resources as the nationalist Chinese who were backed by the West.
Yeah.
United States, General Giap. For those of you who don't know, General Giap was the main general of the North Vietnamese army, good friends with Ho Chi Minh, and he had no formal military education, but credited The Art of War as being the main manual for his strategies, which eventually led to the defeat of the greatest military the world has ever seen, the United States military. But beyond that, throughout Asia, the Japanese, pretty much any legitimate Japanese leader has read The Art of War. Tokugawa Ieyasu, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Oda Nobunaga, who all led to the unification of Japan after the Sengoku Jidai period.
It was so highly coveted in Japan, before Japan was unified, that at the time emperor, I still think they had, it was still an emperor at the time. The emperor ordered spies sent to China to recover the book because they heard of this essentially magical, mysterious book that brought people victory in conquest.
I think it would have been the emperor, because I know the Japanese imperial family is like one of the oldest.
Yeah, no, it's super old.
So it's probably already had their imperial system in place. I mean, by their legends, which is probably not true, they would say that their emperors were there from the beginning of, the split of Japan separating from the main continent. But mandatory reading for pretty much any samurai you want to take seriously. Like we said, Miyamoto Musashi, if you read the Book of Five Rings, you'll find numerous similarities to The Art of War. And of course, this is kind of a Taoist outlook, so of course anything written from a sort of Eastern philosophical, specifically like when I say Eastern, I'm mainly talking about China, Korea, Japan, right? If they come from that similar background, you kind of have a similar way of writing, a similar way of thinking, which is rooted around Taoism, Confucianism, later on Buddhism. But and actually, interesting thing really quick before we go on, a lot of the comments I got on the Dakota video were from people from India talking about how it had a lot of similarities to the Bhagavad Gita. I believe that's the Hindu. The Hindu
epic, I guess.
So that's interesting too. So it's not just China, but anyway, we'll get into that in the future. Like you said, The Art of War grew popular in the West with a lot of business professionals wanting to use the strategies within it. I think one of the things that popularized or introduced The Art of War to the West more recently has been World War II, because you want to understand the Japanese more, and then eventually understand the Chinese, the Vietnamese, you know what I mean? That's one of the things I read. I would recommend The Art of War alongside The Prince by Machiavelli if you want to learn how to achieve power and defeat your enemies. But really quick, let's see, is there anything else I want to introduce before we go into it? Yeah, a lot of people credit it, even coaches of sports. I talked about in the intro video. Bill Belichick, greatest coach of all time, New England Patriots. A lot of good things we can get into. But without further ado, we'll get into the specifics of The Art of War. We wrote a few notes that would just kind of help us stay on track. When we did The Prince by Machiavelli, we kind of kept going all over the place. And
also something to keep us moving along. That way we don't get too
many tangents.
Yeah, too many tangents or too in depth on something, and then we can't finish the book. So
right.
I'm gonna preface this by saying that this argument is going to be structured a little bit less around just purely discussing the philosophy around the book, and a little bit more on to similar how we did with the Prince, relating this to things that we see in the modern frame of warfare, specifically with a lens on the Pacific, and our great peer adversary across the pond from us. Now, going into this, not everything's perfect, and it is a little bit of a, I will acknowledge for myself, I mean, it is a little bit of a confirmation bias. Like, I was kind of looking through, like, reading for what, like, oh, China does this, and it's just talked about here, you know? Mm-hmm. So take what we're about to say with a little bit of a grain of salt, but that being said, China has touted this book for
many years,
millennia at this point in time. So without a doubt, they are focusing, they treat this book similar to how the Marine Corps treats MCDP-1.
Right.
So
it's important to know.
It's important.
Now, I just wanted to read the beginning because I love, I don't like this translation. We're going to go to the translation.
No, I got this isn't the best translation.
Yeah.
But it has good history behind it too, and it's like the most available copy of the Art of War.
Right. I just want to read the famous intro to the Art of War if I can find it. It's the Art of War is of vital importance to the state. And where's my exact? I had the exact things where you basically say it's a matter of life or death.
Yeah.
For the survival of your. There we go. The Art of War is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. Now, we often have this idea that we live in a bubble where, oh, the world must be peaceful because it's peaceful for us. Evil doesn't exist. If you ever watch the Jocko podcast, he talks about evil exists. Horrible atrocities are committed throughout the world right now. Just because we live in a developed country doesn't mean that that's the case. The rest of the world, understanding warfare and being capable of waging war, being capable of violence is integral as a human being who wants to defend the weak. Right?
Yes.
And that's what we want to do. If you're a warrior philosopher, I think that it means, as a philosopher, you have morality, which leads you to using your military capabilities to protect the weak. So that's why I think it's very important.
And not just that, but also if you're a warrior philosopher, if you want to be any sort of Renaissance man, like whatever you want to deem yourself in this, it's important to see the lenses of how other cultures, specifically China, right, our peer adversary in this point in time, to get a look into their mind. Because if you can think like the enemy, right, or just at least take another lens onto something, that's going to give you a leg up in pretty much every aspect of life.
Right.
But yeah, so first off, a quote I took from chapter 1. We're just going to go down the line in the chapters, but chapter 1 is called Initial Estimates. He really talks about, in this chapter, just initial estimates, right? Like estimating the amount that you'll need to pay your troops, the amount of troops that you should take, and but the quote I've taken from here is, prepare when your enemy is numerous, train while your enemy is strong. This is, I mean, you can apply this to anything in life, right? But don't be necessarily eager to go out punching right away if you're not going to win.
Right.
If your enemy's stronger than you, take the time and win a 1,000-year war. That's what China talks about a lot, right? They have this concept of the Millennial War, the 1,000-year war.
Exactly.
They don't want to, in my opinion,
your interpretation.
In my interpretation, they don't want to take on America right now, like teeth by teeth, right? Mm-hmm. That's why they're
playing the long game.
They're playing the long game. They're doing things such as the Belt and Road Initiative, right? They're edging us out.
Can you explain it really quick just for the viewers?
Oh, yeah. So if you don't know what the Belt and Road Initiative is, my explanation is not going to be nearly good enough, so
I can elaborate after.
Yeah. I would encourage you guys to all do research on your own and look into it. But essentially what China is doing is, its full name is the Global Belt and New Silk Road Initiative, I believe.
There's a few different, it depends how you interpret it, but yeah.
So they want to they being the PRC, wants to reestablish the old Silk Road, in essence, right? Make China the trade hub of the world. And they're doing this in two ways. First of all, they're doing infrastructure for land-based modes of transportation, such as building massive railways through Central Asia into Europe in order to make Europe basically, in order to flood the European market with Chinese goods.
Right.
To make China the number one trade partner of Europe. And they're also buying up maritime trade infrastructure all around the world too. For example, but what I mean by buying up is they invest so heavily into ports in countries such as Iran, Djibouti, Somalia, yes, Djibouti, Somalia, and Djibouti, I think, is the biggest one.
Also that's the most significant because of I think it took place recently in the past few years, and that was like a kind of monumental thing because we kind of think of China as being a localized power. That's really showing that they're starting to increase their global outreach, especially in Africa, which is a major problem. They have a big stake in the African market with lithium mining lithium. Basically, I might be saying this wrong, but basically phones require like lithium to help charge the batteries, and that's a very lucrative market in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and you'll see tons of Chinese like businessmen there, and you're like, holy shit, they're getting everywhere now. They're really increasing their power, whereas before, especially in the communist when the communist regime was more communist and less capitalist, you wouldn't really see anyone out of China.
So they invest heavily into these ports. They build up the infrastructure of these ports, and because they put so much investment into it, that nation owes them a debt, and it essentially gives China control of the port. And then this has allowed China to build bases in other countries. Now, it's not just businessmen, but now you see China has a base in Djibouti, and it's in very close proximity to the American base, a military base that we have there as well. Mm-hmm. China is playing this game not just militarily, because, as we've said so far, the art of war isn't just it's not just the art of war. Mm-hmm. It's something that you can apply to multiple aspects of life. So
art of competition. Because war is just... It's like
if you take MCTP 1, war is two wills, right, that are in
contention.
It's irreconcilable.
Gotcha.
Right, and they're fighting to impose
their will.
Yeah, their will on the other. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. And that's clearly right now what China and us. I almost said China and I. China and us.
You are the
yes,
US.
I am the U.S. China and us are doing
some Homelander shit.
Now, furthering on that, China is playing the game in all aspects of the ways to influence a nation. Now, there's like State Department intelligence have an acronym, not State Department intelligence, but State Department and the intelligence community have this acronym for ways to achieve your goals when dealing with another nation, and it's called DIME, because you have diplomatic, informational, militarily, and economic. Mm-hmm. China's clearly, via their Belt and Road Initiative, doing it economically. Mm-hmm. They're building up their military and training for us. That's military, right? Mm-hmm. Diplomatically, you see them all the time in the UN trying to block out.
For example, not allow, because the UN used to recognize Taiwan.
Right? Yes, that's what I was going to say. Mm-hmm. Block out Taiwan, just vetoing bills that would otherwise benefit America. And using all these other methods to get other countries to not recognize Taiwan. Because you looked at 50 years ago, a lot of the world recognized Taiwan.
I think it was up until 72 or something like that when it changed officially. Because up until 1972, they represented China in the UN, I believe. It was in the 70s. I can't remember the exact year, but...
But, going from there, now most countries don't recognize Taiwan. Right. Even the U.S. doesn't.
I can't name one country that would recognize Taiwan.
I think there's two left. I don't know which two.
Some really obsolete countries.
It's probably like Poland or something.
Poland's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
They're tough.
And then informational. And a big informational thing that you see nowadays, and something that's been not necessarily in the news as much as it should be, is China's police stations worldwide. Have you heard of this or looked into it at all?
Not that much, no.
Okay, so China... They've been doing it in Canada. They even did it in America for a little bit. We got them in trouble. We told them to stop doing it, right? Mm-hmm. And this isn't just pure spying, because China does a lot of pure spying. Obviously, they have their whole cyber infrastructure and everything like that. But these police networks, where China installs police networks, specifically they've been doing it throughout the Pacific, throughout the South Pacific, and all of these little I shouldn't say little. It's kind of offensive to the islands, but to all of these islands, where they call it just like a consulate or something like that. They term it something like a consulate. But really what happens is via these consulates, they're able to police their population that's gone out. And they're able to make sure that information doesn't really get back in, and negative information to China doesn't really get back in as much as good information gets in. So
going off of information, now I don't know enough about this, but I have heard like a lot of rumors about TikTok's relationship with China.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, do you know more about that? From what I hear,
so
a lot of the information TikTok gets from their users goes directly to the Chinese government. I don't know how true that is, but that's something I've heard.
We could have a great conversation about this in a skiff, honestly. But what we can say right now is yes, TikTok is essentially Chinese spyware. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's why I've heard from like Joe Rogan and stuff like that.
Yeah. Via its facial recognition technology. So similar to Snapchat or Facebook, right? They just sell your data though, Snapchat and Facebook. But when you use this, it like has various facial recognition things. For example, Snapchat, like the filters, right? They have to recognize your face. They have to scan your face. Facebook will automatically suggest people to tag you or for you to tag. And it's because it goes through and it does facial recognition. TikTok takes all of this and it sends it back to. Yeah, I don't know. Never mind. I can't. Yeah, that's all right. No. It's where I could explain, like I said, a little bit better in a skiff. But yeah,
gotcha.
Essentially, TikTok it just sends it to the PRC. And we'll go into a little bit more about TikTok later because there's other aspects, but I don't want to jump the gun here.
For sure. And back into information, I think that since they like a lot of companies have invested interest in China, such as Nike, they will avoid like the whole free Hong Kong topic, like the NBA, for example.
Yeah.
I say that's an extension of information because you're stopping negative information about China based on your economic power.
Being chilling.
That's right. John Cena. I don't know if you remember. John Cena called Taiwan a country, and he had this whole like apology things where he's like, "I made a really big error. 很多的错误，那么重要的错误。I said Taiwan was a country. I realized it was he was totally like because he probably has a lot of economic interest with Chinese viewers, Chinese companies, etc. So whatever. John Cena, Mr. Playing a Marine in a movie, Mr. America.
Well, yeah,
sell out. Yeah, I like how much. Yeah, he's like, I want ice cream. Anyway, slightly off topic. Honestly, I think based on where this conversation is going, this specific episode could be more about like China and the art of war because I feel like we can do multiple episodes on this. I think the next episode we can go specifically into other because we've already kind of delved into China. I think it would be good to stick. I think we're getting some. Stick with the China. This will be like a Chinese episode.
But so in like how I prefaced it, there's a lot of stuff that's not just China, and we'll kind of go into it. But more of like not a militaristic lens.
It's already 20 minutes in. We talked a lot about China.
Yeah,
we split this up into couple episodes.
Let's move on to the next one. Could you go back to the notes, please?
Sure.
All right, chapter 2 is called Waging War. It talks about waging war. And in this, they talk about like no prolonged warfare. Right? Like this is something that he really mentions. You want to get in there and you want to get out because if you're prolonging your warfare, you're stressing your like supply limit, right? Yeah, you're stressing the entire domestic side of it. It's going to cost a lot of money. Obviously, wars cost money. It's going to take a lot of supplies. It's going to take a lot of bodies.
Hurt morale.
Yeah, hurt morale. The masses. He talks about the masses a lot. In the Art of War, he often talks about the masses. The masses are going to get upset if you keep a long war.
Right.
So you can relate this to
multiple wars,
right?
Many of the United States' recent wars.
Yes.
Which included like so here's the thing, right? You take war from World War II, like pre-World War II and World War II perspective. It was about conquering land, right? You conquer territory, you win.
Yeah.
But you take from Vietnam, and Korea was kind of like that too. Whoever had the territory was winning. But then you get Vietnam, you get the Iraqi war, the Afghan war, all those wars. Well, the Vietnam War was unique because we couldn't actually occupy North Vietnam.
Yeah.
Otherwise, China would have came in. So we literally, there was no way we were going to win that. If we couldn't occupy North Vietnam, if we could occupy North Vietnam, then we could have won that war and the South could have won that war.
Plus, we never engaged the NBA.
Right. Yeah. Well, only if they came to South Vietnam.
Yeah.
We can bomb them. We could do special Black Ops missions, but we couldn't do any actual, real attacks land-wise. But so Vietnam is it definitely explains this, right? But what I wanted to mention, why I brought up Iraq and Afghanistan, we occupied the entire country technically.
Yeah.
Yet, because of the insurgency, the guerrilla warfare tactics that they adopted, there was really no way of, the only way, and this is true of Vietnam as well, it's like bodies of the dead. That's how you quantify success. And if you have to quantify success by how many people you killed, you're probably not going to win that war.
No,
because you got to win.
It's a war of attrition.
People.
Everybody talks bad about wars of attrition. Mm-hmm. You look from a Western perspective. So Sun Tzu obviously talks about you don't want a war of attrition, but you look from a Western perspective, and the entire Clausewitz's whole thing is against wars of attrition as well. Mm-hmm. Maneuver warfare, by far superior.
Right, because in a maneuver warfare, if you take the German strategy in World War II, for example, it wasn't a lot of times. First of all, they were outnumbered. Mm-hmm. Second of all, for example, the French had more tanks than the Germans, but it was about surrounding them, cutting off supply lines. That's literally the whole German strategy. Was all about encirclement. Once you encircle an army, you cut off their supply lines. It doesn't matter if they have more troops than you. You won. Yeah. Not prolonged warfare. Blitzkrieg was built upon not prolonging your warfare, which is why they lost in the Soviet Union, because it's just such a big country that it's literally impossible to have that. Basically, you won't have the supply lines necessary for this sort of mobile warfare. Their resolve was very strong, obviously. It was a huge country, so it's kind of impossible. And then you get prolonged warfare with the Germans and the Soviets, and war of attritions, which are good for the defensive side, but not so much for the offensive side.
Exactly. So So let me preface that you might want a war of attrition, like Patrick said, if you're on the defensive side.
And you have more people, and you're willing to take the losses.
Because right now, Ukraine is obviously fighting a war of attrition against Russia.
Definitely, but they want. Well, this is where it becomes problematic because. So I think a lot of people are probably pretty well versed with the Ukraine situation, but right now the main issue is that our American interest is for the Ukraine to keep Ukraine, but not to retake Donetsk or Luhansk or Crimea. But Zelensky wants to retake the whole of Ukraine, which is impossible. No, even if we continue funding them the way we do, it's probably impossible. But at this point, there's three different interests: the American interest, which is peace right now, the Russian interest, which is a safe face, and the Ukrainian interest, which says we want to retake the whole country, which is impossible. So they're fighting war of attrition right now, but then, which is good for them because they're on the defensive. But what happens if they want to try to retake those territories? Yeah. You're going to have prolonged warfare.
Without a doubt.
Because the people in those areas want to be a part of a pro-Russian government. Luhansk, Donetsk, and I'm not sure about Crimea. I believe Crimea as well. Yeah. The people are pretty supportive of Russian government. Yeah. So
from what I've heard.
Right. So then it's going to shift to Russia benefiting from attrition warfare and Ukraine no longer benefiting from that sort of defensive posture. That's all geopolitics. I mean, Biden at this point is going to have to, if he wants to create peace there, he's going to have to make a decision. He's going to have to tell Zelensky, well, this is an impossible goal. I think if he says, we'll stop giving you Javelin missiles, we'll stop funding you, then he'll probably be forced to come to a peace treaty. It's not ideal. I understand Zelensky's point of view. If he were to retake all of Ukraine, he'd be the hero, but it's just not practical right now, as we see in The Art of War. Prolonged warfare, not good for anybody. So, Ukraine's already completely leveled, pretty much, you know? So it's like, at this point, it'd be beneficial for all sides to sue for peace. But yeah, wars of attrition, tough if you're attacking, as we've established, especially in this day and age with the Javelin missiles, for example, the anti-tank weaponry. Tanks were generally seen as the kind of the mainstay of land attacks in conventional warfare. But the Ukrainian war sort of, in my opinion, proves General Berger's decision to get rid of tanks in the Marine Corps, which so the military-industrial complex hates that. So they hire, and this is why, all right, here's something I'm mad about. All of the ex-Marine generals, like General Mattis, have sold out to the military-industrial complex because they have paid them to be lobbyists for the military-industrial complex who wants to sell their tanks. Now that Marine Corps doesn't have any tanks, they're like, oh, this is horrible. Strategically, it's bad. No, strategically, it's not bad. They just have a vested interest in maintaining tanks in the Marine Corps. That's sort of a separate thing, but, That's just something I think is kind of silly.
No.
Warfare always changes, and you have to adapt to the change.
It definitely does, right? It's
That's fine. Yeah,
okay.
keep recording. Really quick, because I just thought of something that's really good from The Art of War, is he talks about not letting the sovereign be too involved in the military. Yeah. And by extension, the military-industrial complex is almost like an extension of the sovereign, because it's like it's not the actual military, it's interests that are, by extension, part of the government, interfering with our strategy. If the military-industrial complex makes our strategy detrimental for their economic gain, that is bad, and that is something that Sun Tzu speaks out against greatly.
No, it totally makes sense. And just for the sake of time here, we're going to move on to the next one.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another episode on the Art of War.
Chapter 3 is planning offensives, right? So he more gets into like going on the attack and how you would go about doing that. And excerpt I took from this one is, thus one who excels at employing the military subjugates other people's armies without engaging in battle, captures other people's fortified cities without attacking them, and destroys other people's states without prolonged fighting. Right? So when I looked at this, I was thinking about, I'm going to end up using a buzzword here. It's in the media a lot lately, but psyops is the buzzword, right? And we're straying away from the term psyops in the military, and we're trying to move over to more like information operations or whatever. But
psyops is
psychological
warfare. Gotcha, I thought so.
Yeah. But yeah, you want to break the minds, you want to break the spirit, you want to break the hearts of people before you even conquer. Yeah, right. Because Sun Tzu talks a lot about the best war to win is when you don't have to fight, or the best way to win a war is not fighting. You just win it, right? Like, and a great example of this from an American lens, right? We didn't conquer the Soviet Union. We didn't conquer East Germany. We didn't have to go. We didn't have to go through. They conquered themselves for us, right? Yeah. And China essentially is trying to do that right now. So what I mean by this, and I'll get a little bit more into depth later, but this ties back to the TikTok thing, right? TikTok being Chinese controlled, right? It has Chinese algorithms within it, and these algorithms are designed specifically to relatively weaken the American spirit. I'll delve a little bit more into this and why China has this concept in a couple chapters, I guess.
We'll see how much we can cover.
Yeah, we'll see how much we can cover, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is...
I got to go to the gym at 6 to get buff, so, you know. Anyway, but extending off of chapter 3. And it's funny, when I was doing because I've done 2 videos on the channel about the Art of War.
Yeah.
I looked up the different translations. So many different books have different names for the chapters. So the one I was reading was Attack by Stratagem, and he talks about the 5 essentials for victory, which I think I'm going to do a video on at some point, more in depth. But just relating to what you said, because it kind of relates to your quote, I just want to read them out really quick. So number 1 is, he will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. So it kind of goes into picking battles you know you can win. Number 2, he will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. Obviously, you're not always going to have a numerical advantage. Yeah. And sometimes you're going to be the bigger force, but then you're going to face armies like the Vietnamese army or Iraq and Afghanistan. You have to know how to be the occupier as well.
You're France, and you put all your troops on the Maginot Line.
Sure. Yeah, technically, they were all... I don't know if I can call them superior, but they certainly, like...
Well,
they had
numerically
more...
wise, yeah.
I think so.
No, they did. They had a bigger stand.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just... I don't want to say anything that I don't know for sure. Yeah. Because I know they had more tanks, but I'm not sure. Because I know they lost a lot of people in World War I, and that was a big problem, was the French population.
That's very true.
So I don't know for sure. I think they probably did if you include Belgium and the Dutch and the British Expeditionary Unit or Army. They probably did have more troops than the Germans, but I just don't want to say anything that's not accurate. Fair. You're probably right, but I've been caught before. Actually, somebody commented on the episode 2, the Prince Machiavelli, and they corrected us. They said when I think we're talking about serfdom being abolished. I think you said it was Nicholas I or something like that, but then he corrected it was Alexander II. I researched it. You're not 100% wrong. He started the process of abolishing serfdom, but then it ended up being Alexander II. But anyway, I get sad when I'm wrong and someone calls me out, so I'm just not going to... I'm going to play it safe, the politician way, deflect now. But anyway, number 3, he will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all its ranks. That's essentially morale.
Yeah.
Like, you have to... one of the biggest detriments you can have is classism and sort of elitism in the military. Like certain people not doing the same work as other people.
Yeah.
Like you take the Roman general Marius. One of the things he was famous for was he slept in the same conditions as his legionaries. He ate the same food. He did the same trench work. I think that's important because that builds good morale throughout the ranks that you do the same work.
Without
right?
a doubt. Mm-hmm.
Number 4, he who will win who prepared himself waits to take the enemy unprepared. That kind of relates to number 1. You pick when you attack. You always want to pick when your enemy is not as prepared as you are. That's kind of straightforward. He will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. That's why I said relating to, like I said, I believe you can relate the military-industrial complex's interests to the sovereign interest.
Ultimately.
Because they have a heavy lobby, which sometimes is not going to, it's going to interfere with our strategy. Because victory, our most efficient victory, isn't necessarily going to coincide with our economic interests. Yeah. As we saw with the tanks, right? So that kind of goes into that. And then one more thing while we're on chapter 3. Hence the saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Essentially, that's have the information, have the intel, the intelligence. Intelligence, especially in this day and age, is everything in military, or in war, you know. So I think that's an incredibly pertinent quote today, especially regarding China. China. But, so yeah, that's... Should we move on to
chapter 4? So chapter 4, in my translation, is called Military Disposition. This one, we're kind of going down the same road with this one. This one's back to being like psychological warfare, but here we go. So, being unconquerable lies within yourself. Being conquerable lies within the enemy. Right? So, that being said, if I am trying to conquer somebody, I have to make them conquerable, and they're not going to do that willingly, right? I have to kind of influence that. And what I chose for this was a video. I mean, a lot of the viewers may have seen it. It's I forget the guy's name, but it's a video that came out from an ex-KGB intelligence officer, and he laid out this KGB program that surrounds the idea of disinformation. Now, I try to say like the actual name of the program, but it's like Russian, and I would butcher it absolutely. But essentially, this program, the way it worked was, America is conquerable, like not conquerable. America is very not conquerable, especially like in the 60s, in the 60s, 70s, 80s even, right? Like I mean, we're still pretty unconquerable at this point in time. So you have to make them conquerable. And the KGB's idea for this different disinformatia or whatever, was that they'd spread propaganda, essentially, spread a bunch of disinformation, and by doing certain actions and taking certain actions, make America conquerable in the future. And I would highly recommend that you guys look a little bit more into this and see this. And the reason why I'm bringing this up in relation to China is because China, obviously being a Eastern Bloc state, right? It's a communist bloc state. Realistically, they would have taken some things from Soviet military doctrine. And the reason why I say this is because they very recently just switched to our military doctrine and away from the Soviet military doctrine, especially after seeing the way that Russia is faring in Ukraine, right?
Not so well.
No, not so well. Given that they are trying to do essentially the same thing to Taiwan. And if you copy Russia, you're gonna fail. But a little bit different. This is information. If they took this doctrine, who's to say that they aren't using their media that they control, right, and going after our like hearts and minds in essence, right? For example. And if you don't believe that they're in the media, they're completely in the media, right?
Of course.
Because certain film industries or certain filmmakers can't do things in their movies without the risk of angering the PRC.
Yeah, have you seen the newest Ip Man?
So that's 4? Or
I forget the number, but it just totally like shits on Americans, like, you evil Americans. You remember that?
Yeah.
And it's like the great protector.
Like the Marine. I think it's the guy from Kickboxer. Why can't I think of his name?
But he's like a gunny.
Yeah, he was like a gunny.
And he's like such an asshole. Yeah, he's such an asshole. He's racist.
All he does
all Americans are like that.
Yeah, all he does is just beat on the Chinese. All right, yeah, kicking the little guy in the movie. It's not like China's committing genocide, but whatever. But
we don't want to get canceled by the PRC.
Oh, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Bing Xinling. Taiwan isn't a country. I'm so sorry.
So yeah, the PRC, or West Taiwan, as I like to call it, is probably adopting this concept of disinformation. It's my interpretation of it. You can find plenty of examples of how the media gets altered for the PRC's needs, in essence. But yeah, I encourage the audience to look into this a little bit more.
It's so funny. Your translation's so different from mine.
Yeah, I know. It's not the best.
I might just grab mine, honestly.
It's not the best translation, like I said, but I mean, it's the art of war, so.
Yeah.
All right. What's the next one? You wanna read it?
Around 5, yeah.
Yes.
Strategic military power. One who excels at warfare seeks victory through configurations of power. Or is that supposed to be chi?
Sure.
Is that also is that the same thing as chi? I think it's maybe not. Maybe it's sure is different, but
yeah,
not through reliance on men. Thus, he is able to select men and employ strategic power.
So
you can keep going. I'm just gonna grab my copy really quick.
Go ahead. A reliance on the strategic configuration of your power and not on like the men themselves is what this talks about. Essentially, what I'm pulling from this is one of the reasons why. This is a somewhat controversial statement, but don't take me out of my word for this. China is able to be successful because they are an autocratic state, and by being an autocratic state, especially the way that they're configured, they don't have to rely on men in the same way that America does, right? Because if somebody messes up, they can just get purged out of power. You see it happen all the time in China, right?
Yeah.
But not only that, if you want somebody to do something, you can just tell them to do it. That's how the government works. In a free country, and obviously I'm not shitting on a free country right here, but in a free country, you don't really have that advantage. That's just something I want people to like think about and kind of like just let ruminate. Now, I also want to relate this because this serves kind of somewhat in opposite to something that China's doing nowadays. Because China doing this nowadays is when I mentioned that they're kind of taking more of an American way to it. Okay, I'm gonna put this away because I don't want to. I don't. This translation is.
You want to do my translation?
Yeah, sure. Let's. I'm gonna move back to chapter 1 for this estimates.
I could tell just because of the way that these chapters are named.
Yeah,
it's like the more traditional one.
Yeah, so here you go. So it talks about in chapter 1 in initial estimates, Sun Tzu talks about something called the Tao of Command, exactly, right? In essence, what he's saying with the Tao of Command is he wants there to be a flow between the ranks, right? And not just a downward flow, but the flow flows upstream as well, and like in his not in his words, but in my interpretation of his words. And something that China is doing nowadays, something that they've implemented is they've implemented an NCO corps. And if you look at most Eastern Bloc nations, especially East Asian nations as well, aside from like South Korea and Japan nowadays, NCO corps aren't really there. And typically, you just have
Russia's definitely
Russia's definitely not there. You just have generals that are realistically also oligarchs, and they're kind of just managing their troops, and there's no Tao of Command.
Isn't it like, from what I know, this is a number I'm throwing out there. Maybe like one officer to like 50 enlisted or something. It's like something stupid.
It's probably something stupid, ridiculous like that.
I mean, and why do they get so many generals killed? You know what I mean? Because the generals are probably trying to do the job that NCOs would be doing.
Exactly. And that's something that America does very well. And it's enabled America to win so many wars, right?
Yeah. Because the fog with the fog of war and the chaotic, I think this goes back to Clausewitz as well. Like the chaotic nature of warfare. You need there to be a way that, because like especially if you go back to old warfare, right?
Yeah.
Where we didn't have as much communication. If you had one general and he was in the middle of the army, but then you have like a mile of territory where you have your troops, right? You're not gonna be able to quickly tell the guy in the far right flank to react to a situation, because by the time you get that message, it can be like 30 minutes after it happened. You need each individual officer and then their officers and then their officers to be able to make their own decisions.
Yes. Battalion command.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you guys want to look into it, I encourage you guys to look into China's newly created NCO Corps. I think I even I sent a link to you earlier about that.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet.
Yeah,
I still gotta read that.
But no, so here, you know what? I'll go through and I'll find the link and I'll just kind of we'll throw it in like the description or something. A couple links of articles that I pulled up for this that you guys could read. I encourage you guys to read. But
absolutely,
no, the creation of an NCO Corps is huge for China. It shows that their military is evolving from and that their whole war doctrine, though staying revolved around the art of war, is evolving. Right? Oh, actually no. There's the link right there. I see it.
There you go.
But it came from a task and purpose article. But it's basically talent management 2030, but China style. So, chapter 6 is named in my translation Vacuity and Substance, but in a better translation, it is called
Maneuver.
Wait,
no, that's chapter 7. Sorry, 7. Weaknesses and strengths.
Weaknesses and strengths. I guess it's the same thing, right? Vacuity and substance, weaknesses.
This guy likes to show off his vocabulary.
Yes. So a big thing here that it talks about is probing into your enemy to figure out how they're going to react, and flowing kind of with the vacuity and substance, right? In this concept, it's not like literal emptiness and like actual, like I don't know, hard rock. It's a flow. War is an ebb and flow. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing, and he kind of mentions this here as well. And he talks specifically about probing your enemy, trying to get them to react, noticing how they react, and then from there, building your future operations around that reaction. If you want an example of China doing this today, probing the enemy, just look into their incursions. So. I believe just last week they flew like 46 planes into Taiwanese
airspace.
Taiwanese ADIS. They flew some, I want to say a J-35 into one of their newer aircraft. They flew into South Korea's ADIS not that long ago, and they even flew their new drone. It's like the Divine Eagle or something like that. They flew that one over Japan, and Japan actually had to intercept it. That one was just a few days ago, I feel like. They're probing. It's not just to exhaust the resources of these countries, which is also a big factor that happens with it, but you also can see the reactions, and from there you can measure response times, you can measure how they respond, and build your plans accordingly.
And here, listen to this, just to relate it to Musashi and especially Bruce Lee. Now, an army may be likened to water. For just as flowing, water avoids the heights and hastens to the lowlands. So an army avoids strength and strikes weakness. And as water shapes its flow in accordance with the ground, so an army manages its victory in accordance with the situation of the enemy. As water has no constant form, there are in war no constant conditions. Thus, one able to gain victory by modifying his tactics in accordance with the enemy situation may be said to be divine. So essentially, like you said, you're probing. You're probing and you're figuring out how to mesh and how to flow. Yep. Bruce Lee, exactly. Be like water. And then there's one more thing I wanted to say. I'm trying to remember. I'll probably go back to it later. But yeah, I mean, it's just that's right. It goes back to Clausewitz as well with the chaotic nature of the battlefield. You can't have two. It's like Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
You have your perfect strategy laid out for battle, then all of a sudden you get ambushed. And like, what the fuck do you do now, right? So it's like you have to always be prepared to. First of all, you should know your enemy enough to know or be able to kind of have intuition based on what unexpected things they might try to do, and then just be able to adapt to that. So always, you got to be fluid. You can't be too like you have to adapt to the times. You have to adapt your strategy and never let your opponent know your next move.
Exactly. And That's exactly what an NCO is supposed to do too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have just one it's what decentralization does.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of decentralization, speaking of moving towards better military tactics, the next chapter really goes into it. And the next chapter in my translation is called Military Combat.
And in mine, it's called Maneuver.
Maneuver. Now, a lot of people look at Eastern styles of warfare and say that it's not maneuver warfare. It's more of an attrition warfare, especially when you look at like records of China and how like 20 million people would perish in like.
So we're talking about like China or Eastern, such as China, Korea.
Yeah.
Because Mongols definitely did.
Okay, yeah, Mongols definitely did maneuver warfare. However, if you read through The Art of War, it talks a lot about maneuver warfare, and specifically this quote I'm about to read. My translation says it pretty well. So, thus the army is established by deceit, moves for advantage, changes through segmenting and reuniting. It's maneuver warfare right there. And maneuver warfare actually is deeply rooted in the communist China's history. Mao Zedong himself. I read an article about this. I'll find a link and we'll throw the link in there as well. But Mao Zedong had this concept called mobile warfare. That helped him to defeat the Nationalist Party and to defeat the Japanese as well. Maybe not defeat the Japanese, but inflict damage upon the Japanese. And it is this mobile warfare that still plays a huge role in China's current military doctrine. Because anybody that really analyzes warfare can tell you that maneuver warfare is the supreme way to go.
Right. I've kind of proven that to be the case.
Yeah.
Recently.
So yeah, I'll throw a link in that a link of that article in the description for you guys. But yeah, check out that article, read through it. Like I said, it's important if you're a warrior, if you want to be a Renaissance man, anything that you want to like throw in there, it's important to understand the goals and the obstacles that we may or may not have to face in the future.
Right.
Chapter 8 is called...
really quick before we go on, I just want to... so, regarding this chapter, some things, I was just going through it really quick, and, it kind of goes back to picking the right moment to attack. It's talking about, like, certain moments of time when attacking is more favorable. The sort of concept of deception, I think, is a little bit introduced in this chapter as well. They say... he basically says, for example, he says, when he pretends to flee, do not pursue. A lot of time, part of this, you see it throughout the book as well. A lot of times, Sun Tzu talks about armies, whether it be your own or your enemies, often feigning a certain disposition to warrant a reaction out of you. So, for example, if the enemy is attempting to look weak, they might be baiting you to attack because they're appearing weak. Or if the enemy appears strong, they're in reality weak, and they're trying to appear strong so that you don't attack. And he kind of touches up on this a little bit. That's the whole point of setting baits, trying to get the enemy to bite on certain things. They're going to try to get you to bite on certain things. This is in martial arts as well.
Yeah.
You throw feints. Like, a lot of fighters that are really good head movement, they'll, like, leave their head forward. I like to do that so I can get a reaction on my opponent's bait. He comes in, he throws a shot, I pull, slip that right hand. That's all she wrote. But, yeah, that's, throughout, like I said, throughout the book, there's a lot of, he points to deception a lot, deceiving your enemy, never letting them know your next move. But, yeah, and, like, we are coming a little short on time. Quiet, Gimli! We're going a little short on time, so I think we'll hit chapter 8, and then we'll kind of conclude.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then we'll continue, next episode, we can continue with the Art of War as well. And we can get more into some of the other applications. You could talk about this book for hours.
Yeah, no, honestly. It's the same as the Prince, it's just, we're picking and choosing when we can.
Yeah.
Chapter 8 is called, in my book, in my translation, 9 Changes.
Okay, good. The 9 variables.
Okay,
there we go.
Cool. The quote I selected from this chapter is, for this reason, the wise must contemplate the intermixture of gain and loss. If they discern advantage, their efforts can be trusted. If they discern harm, difficulties can be resolved. And when I read that line, the thing that stuck out to me instantly was the concepts from MCDP1, warfighting, that talk about the center of gravity and the critical vulnerability, right? you want to discern things that'll cause you harm, that's the center of gravity of your enemy. You want to discern things that will bring you advantage, that's the enemy's critical vulnerability. You obviously, in somewhat, want to stray away from the center of gravity, and you kind of want to attack, you want to exploit this critical vulnerability, and Sun Tzu says the exact same thing. Like, you want to do this, and this can be applied to way more than just warfare as well, right? So if I look at martial arts, is a great one, obviously, right? Like, my center of gravity, because I have roots in Taekwondo, is kicking, right? I can keep you like standing. I know the distance is great. I can keep you cool. That's why, I mean, when we used to spar, we haven't sparred in a while. No. When we used to spar, Patrick and I would always be like relatively even from a standing point. But my critical vulnerability is that I suck at anything grappling wise.
And your cardio sucks.
Oh, my cardio's fine now.
Last time we sparred, I've been training a lot more recently too, though.
Yeah.
But last time your cardio, I was like just walking.
When was that?
We were at 10th Planet.
Oh.
That Muay Thai day.
Yeah.
You can't deny I got the better of you in that one.
Yeah, no, you did get the better of me in that one. But
we'll have to have a Rocky Apollo 3.
Yeah. Anyways, going back out to the critical vulnerability, right? You can exploit the critical vulnerability of your opponent if you know, for example, they're not a great striker, if you know that they have very short reach, or if you know that they aren't a good grappler, right? Away from martial arts, you can move to business too, right? And it just really applies to everything.
I think you can also take what he said at face value too, relating to things like martial arts, because and he talks about the 5 different qualities which are dangerous for the character. Generally, he talks about recklessness, cowardice, quick-temperedness, people who have a delicate sense of honor, which means like if you like I bite my thumb at thee, you know, you try to insult them and they'll get angry.
Yeah.
People who are too compassionate. You can relate this to martial arts. So you take like Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo. Like he kind of knew certain things would piss him off, right? And you can apply this to business. It's essentially psychology, understanding your enemy, understanding how to rile him up, how to have his weaknesses kind of bubble over, right? And you know, psychology is an incredibly important part of warfare, competition, conflict. So, yeah, I think it's a good chapter.
And I think if you look at those 5 traits, you can also relate it to indifference, like the concept of indifference to things.
For yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
Like trying to be indifferent yourself, yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So I mean, could you read them off again?
Yeah. So these are the 5 qualities that are dangerous in the character of a general. If reckless, he can be killed. If cowardly, captured. If quick-tempered, you can make a fool of him. If he has too delicate a sense of honor, you can calumniate him. If he is of compassionate nature, you can harass him. Now, these 5 traits of character are serious faults in a general and in military operations are calamitous.
Yeah, so if you just maintain that relatively even-keeled composure all the way through, right?
Just react to the state of nature.
Just react to the state of nature. Yeah.
Stoic mindset.
Yeah, that stoic mindset, or what Misaki talks about, right? Being
even a Taoist mindset.
Yeah, Taoist mindset. Yeah.
Ebbing with the flows. Ebbs and flows. Flowing with ebbs and flows.
Yes, something like that.
But anyway, yeah, I gotta head to the gym soon and get swole. So
that's fine.
We'll cut this. We did about an hour.
It might be our shortest podcast we've done. Only an hour actually.
Yeah, but we're gonna like chop this up anyway.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
We don't want to like do too long here, and then the next one we only have 20 minutes of content. It's like, oh, anyway, we'll definitely have a lot to talk about though. It's the art of war, but you know, like I said, I was trying to make my last podcast a video, and I accidentally deleted the video. So hopefully this time I don't delete the video.
Yeah, hopefully.
So, inshallah.
So, this was our first podcast that we've had for a while. I think
first of the new year.
Well, yeah, I think I haven't been on one in like 2 months because I've been gone.
And then you're gonna be gone again.
I'm about to leave for another month. So
all this training.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I'm Brandon Williamson. This is Patrick Hamilton.
And this is the Warrior Philosopher.
Building the foundations of the warrior philosophy.
And we'll see you next time. All right.